Okay. Welcome to our webinar, Beyond Trial and Error, testing, A/B testing and pricing. So just some quick logistics for the webinar here. So everyone that's in here, other than those that you're seeing on the screen, you're going to be joining as an attendee versus a panelist. So you'll notice that you have the ability to chat us, and that is really encouraged. That's the way that you're going to be able to ask us questions. We've disabled microphones to keep it quiet and smooth. So if you do have any questions, please do write them in the chat. I'll be monitoring them throughout. To give you some context on who's speaking, so my name is Johnny Stoddard. I'm CRO and co-founder at MarketDial. In a prior life, I was a consultant at McKinsey and Company in their marketing and sales practice area before co-founding MarketDial. So excited to be here and excited to talk to you today. My pleasure to introduce our other speakers. So Morgan Davis is CEO and co-founder at MarketDial. Prior was a venture capital investor as well as management consultant at BCG in their consumer practice area. So hello, Morgan. Thanks for making it. And then Alex Galkin is the CEO and co-founder of Competera. He's a seasoned executive with 18 plus years of experience in retail pricing. He's an official member of the Forbes Technology Council and a mentor at the Founder Institute. So good to have you, Alex. So by way of agenda, we're gonna be quick with our time to cover a bunch of good topics today. So we'll give a brief introduction to Competera, followed by an introduction to MarketDial. The bulk of our presentation is we're gonna answer this question of why A/B testing is important for pricing projects. To dive into that, we're going to talk about three types or methodologies of A/B tests. We'll talk through the typical risks associated with those challenges and how you can mitigate them. And then we'll give some tactical ideas on how you can improve your pricing execution. And we'll leave some time at the end for a Q&A. But again, very encouraged for you to put your questions in the chat throughout. And we will try to address them in real time as well. So let's kick off with an intro to Competera.
Hey, hello guys. Yeah, just thank you for the nice introduction. Yeah, guys, this is Competera here, and very interesting story that this is journey for AI pricing begins many years ago when I really saw that is actually something can be done better. And machine learning can capable to really help us. And as you see here, we're doing this right now technically from 2014, but the real appreciation AI got just now from 2024. Yeah, exciting to be here and walk you through all these materials what we prepare, some practical examples, and it's why we all here to show you something really practical. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Morgan, tell us a bit about MarketDial.
Yeah, I'll be quick because we're going to talk about a lot of what we do as we get into it. But as Johnny sort of mentioned in our intros, he and I were both in a prior life management consultants, if you won't hold that against us, and really saw this sort of gap between all of the hypotheses that retailers had and that consultants were bringing and that great partners like Competera and others were bringing to the table, and the need to validate those hypotheses and to measure the impact of those, and found that that was actually a lot harder than we expected and should be. And so Johnny and I sort of left our consulting gigs to build MarketDial, which is a platform that helps retailers design and analyze A/B tests in just like a really, really simple way. So we support clients across the retail spectrum, from grocery and specialty, convenience, fashion, discount, value, sort of you name it, which gives us the experience to sort of talk pretty generally about testing. So excited to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Morgan. All right, with that, let's dive in a bit.
Yeah, cool. It's actually we met with MarketDial, like I don't remember, like right now, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, right? Yep. This is was exactly, guys, where I also spent time in Deloitte, and this is absolutely right. Is to test this is really complicated, and most reasons why retailers knocking our door in Deloitte was 2 reasons. They realized their pricing is reactive. They change pricing when something is already happens, and super limited. They're considering very limited numbers of the factors. but same time then say, yeah, if we can do something differently, how we can measure. And right now for us, the Competera, and actually the idea behind was, okay, can we create the place, and just get next slide, we can give the retail the place that they can technically leverage as much as possible factors, and generate optimal prices, covering not only particular SKU, but a bunch of the SKU, taking into the account the actually relations between the SKUs, external situation like store positions, etc. And even today, guys, for each project, what Competera delivers starts from A/B testing, or we call it in our spec limited rollout, because from machine learning perspective, for us to run optimization of one SKU, is technically need to done the whole work behind that. And next slide. And this is why I think this is super important in any pricing project starts from A/B testing or limited rollout. And you don't I put here on the first place the better and faster adoption by end users, because really, I don't know, like in my experience, merchants, they really protective people, and they're doing a lot of stuff a long time ago, and for them to showing that is like more optimal, or your private brand is more powerful than some A brand in some specific locations. And it's really something really hard to convince. And I remember how many hours we spent as a consultants convincing merchants. This is why the number one reason, better and faster adoption. Number two, of course, more precise calculation of the possible return on investments, and should also take a specific time. We will cover all of this. It's very important that to demonstrate the business that the new approach is really work. And of course, if don't, is more agile. We can really make some slowly the organizational change would really need to work on this. Yeah, Morgan, what is your perspective in terms of like you're doing this A/B testing? This is a core of your business. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think this is a pretty key one, and Johnny tends to make a really good pitch on this, where it feels like in abstract, A/B testing can slow down a project if you think about it, because you get great insights from Competera and you're really eager to roll them out. But importantly, what it does actually, it speeds up the valuable time in any sort of initiative there. So it might actually put a little bit of a bubble in the process up front, but it helps you get confidence to either roll out that initiative or kill that initiative early on. And when you have folks, like you mentioned, like merchants who are really protective and people who really care about building the business, this is the way to sort of prove it out quickly and cheaply, such that you can actually move a lot quicker when you're taking on new initiatives. So yeah, I like that, makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, the post rollout, we call rollout stage, is much easier. You have this A/B test pre-rollout stage because you pick those champions and they execute this faster. Yeah, and we will going to start from the actually first type of the A/B test method. Just next slide. Sorry. We cover today, guys, all these three methods that we have prepared, and we will cover like the pros and cons, each of them, that you can get as much as possible practical experience here. And let's move to the first one. And the first one, we call this split test. Honestly, still the powerful place that you can convince the leadership board of directors that this is new approach really works better. Only we call it the field test. It means that in this situation, we splitting those stores and categories, can be like whole categories in the store, but usually there's a few categories in test group by clustering them, selecting, approving with the retail, with the customer. Yeah, and then select this test set of products that see the minimal cannibalization between those categories, etc. They should behave more or less simultaneously over the past. And of course, then launch the real pilot where in one stores, in test stores, prices would be adjusted. In the control group, they can be adjusted at the way how they did before, or remain the same. During this method, in the next slide, yeah, we are actually focused to actually measure everything. And most important metric, what we measure there is acceptance rates. It means that how many generated recommendation was accepted by the end users. And by the way, we even highlighting this in the final results that it was acceptance rate was around 90%. We just got the grade two test, it was 98% acceptance rate. And by the way, guys, the statistical fact and the production rollout, this acceptance rate drops to like 60% and then go again, slowly, because people go and try to change it even if they don't just like have just a gut feel why. And this is, yeah, during this of course the any metrics should be measured, but this is one of the important one. But of course the sales revenue impact, and this is one of the example. Yeah, it's good.
Okay, great.
Yeah, one of the example is actually that you can see right now the results. So this is a table, but over the test we see this also over the time, and this is the difference in the performance between test group and control group. Yeah, and this particular example, you can see very fun fact, like what happens with the profit margin, but at the same time with item solves. Josh, maybe I can address this question to you. You actually don't know that I will ask you this. That what your expectation? Why item sold is increased but margin drop in control group? What merchants did this time? Like small hint. What do you guess?
Oh, interesting. I mean, it feels like my econ brain's going here. There's like a margin elasticity thing. So it feels like potentially like a price drop if you're moving more, but yeah, I'm not sure.
It's actually close because the merchants, honestly, in this case, they know it that is A/B test is going, right? And they start dropping they was hard on promotion. They dropping the prices. Is why they drop the profit margin, and they quite good fight with item sold. You saw, but it was really hard. This is why the revenue technically merchant help us to achieve the better result in test group by their behavior. I think we thought maybe if they will do nothing, it would be comparison closer results, because for us to see that revenue impact like 16% is quite outstanding. Usually like is lower, maybe twice. Yeah, but they technically helps the system. Yeah, move forward here. Yeah, this is actually the example how is measured during the timeline. And you see this optimizer should, again, just small spoiler, like in Competera, in our environment, we usually work with the big retailers with a lot of assortment. There's a lot of price change. It's not about all this A/B tests. It's not about, like measuring what particular price, and the impact is more about like the bulk, right? The bulk impact on the selected categories on the stores. Yeah, and as you can see, the overall progress was great, and the drop happens here. We lost the promotional data set. In that moment, we stopped receiving information about the ongoing promotions, and results drop and then restored as soon as we restored those data set. This is the example of actually the pilot A/B testing dashboards, how they looks like. And I prepared one more example. Is like, but very often customers asking it, can everything go smoothly? And of course not. And sometimes you can see that is in this example, give you the background of this project is a huge car part sellers online. And this is a lot of items and a lot of dropship items. There's a lot of noise of the data. There's a huge assortment, more than 300,000 positions listed. And on the left side, the first round, the idea was to give the machine learning to grow, target to grow the gross profit and maintaining the revenue. And the green weeks, and it's like usually this takes, we predict like 6 to 8 weeks just to be ensured that is like the result is sustainable. And you see that is like was quite good on gross profit, like, and then again, just small backup. The machine learning learned the historical data is why also A/B testing and limited rollout is very important, because we need to see the results in the fields. Very quickly, you see this was quite the first run, trying to increase gross profit. Honestly, we was not happy with the maintaining the revenue, because the revenue was not maintained like 1, 2, 3, 4 times from like 8 weeks. Technically 50% of the pilot was not successful, and we reset up everything and go to round 2, trying to saying what we can do if we will change the optimization targets, go with a revenue optimization and same time maintaining the gross profit. And honestly it went well. And small question again, Morgan, now to you. What do you think, why the week 1, week 2, week 3 was completely off in the second round?
Oh Man, you're asking the wrong person here. You know, with an e-com based brand in our world of retail, this feels like somebody didn't implement the initiative, like it didn't get executed. But I could be wrong. What went on there?
Yeah, actually, guys, what we learned, we set up too quickly the second run, and you see that the time needed for the model to adopt from revenue gross profit optimization to revenue optimization, and it needs to pass. And now is learning if you run two A/B tests too close to each other, or select different test group, or wait a bit. And you see from the week 4, it was going quite successful, and the customer by the end of the day was really happy that see that we can control the metric what we want to grow and metric what we want to maintain.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And actually, if we jump to the next one, this is a pretty good segue into the way that we think about testing here, which is it's pretty hard to get right. And it's easy to do things like what you had mentioned before, Alex, where you're double testing in the same sites, or you didn't wait an appropriate amount of time in between them. And so you're not reading what you think you're reading when it comes to an experiment. You're reading some prior activity. We see a lot of different stuff that creeps up primarily unintentionally, right? Like people don't intend to bias a test, but they accidentally do it. And it's more complicated than you would think. Like if you look at sort of the test design and analysis process, it's conceptually actually very straightforward. It's not all that, it's not rocket science, right? It's actually just the base fact scientific method. We didn't invent it. It's been around for, ever here. But the way that it works and how it connects to retail, both online and offline, is really interesting, and it has some sort of flavor changes that you need to be aware of, right? So it starts all with a great idea, a great hypothesis, and those are primarily everybody's job in retail, right? So if you're working on the operations team, your job is to think of new ways to optimize labor, to execute tasks you've been given. If you work at Pizza Hut, your job is how many pizzas can I put through? So operations has their thing. Merchandisers have their thing. If there's a pricing specific team, they work with great folks like Competera to develop those ideas and to push those forward. From there, though, designing the experiment takes a more statistical approach, right? So you have to understand how big a test group needs to be, how many stores or how many customers are we going to impact with the treatment or intervention, how long that test needs to run for. In your prior example, it looks like they were both each for 8 weeks. And so if that's the constraint, we need to run this for 8 weeks. We need to understand, well, how many stores do I need to run this for? And what size of impact can I hope for to get that? Importantly, in pricing tests, especially in convenience-based things. So if you think about like grocery, convenience, restaurants in particular, it works, right? Like as soon as you launch them, pricing will tend to work. But what you need to understand is the long-term curve of that behavior to understand if you've impacted customer value perception over time and change that behavior. Next, you need to pick treatment and control sites, and we can talk a little bit about this, but that's harder than you would think, right? And all I'll say on this is the test site is almost certainly not the one right next to your store. Like that's not the one to use. So picking the right test sites, picking the right control sites to make sure that you're measuring appropriately the right things, and then we're going to go on and launch the experiment and then measure those outcomes. So there's a lot going on that needs to happen, and our sort of whole life as a software company is to help make that really easy. One sort of example of this here on the next slide is with a retailer that has a pizza business on the side, and it's a big pizza business, so it really, really matters to them, and they primarily sell by the slice. So although this is not their primary business, they care a lot about this business. It drives a lot of visits. It drives a lot of loyalty to their brand. So what this retailer, though, given increased inflation and other sort of pressures on their business, they needed to raise their price. The margins weren't where they needed to be. And they kind of had two hypotheses for how to approach pricing in this way. Take it sort of a little bit incrementally, or make a big enough move that it actually has an impact here. And they didn't think, or they didn't know which would be the one, so they ran a bunch of tests to measure this. In this case, kind of a multi-cell experiment to understand, hey, is 20 cents a slice up or 10 cents a slice up better for our business and for our brand and consumers? What they did is exactly that. So they picked two groups of treatment sites that represented their fleet, represented their behavior, such that if it worked in those treatment sites, there'd be confidence it would work when they rolled it out to the rest of their thousands of locations. And then for each of those sites, they picked a control site that, for all intents and purposes, was identical, but for that increase in pizza slice pricing. And what they found is not sort of crazy here, but it really helped them get confidence around this. They were very nervous to change these prices because this is a core part of their business. And actually, they found that sales here was the key driver to this, in a little bit of a lower priced effort in here, or a little lower price change here. So they drove about 4% lift in sales for this item in this category, and versus they actually drug sales. And when you look at the margin intake here, we don't have this data on here because it's a bit proprietary, but when you look at the margins, in pricing changes, it can be okay, right, to lose revenue. That's your goal, is typically margin. What they found was the loss in units and was big enough when they increased the price to 20 cents higher that their margin actually was eroded over that time. So not only when they increased the price, they saw a marginal lift in sales that it went directly to their bottom line in the 10% or the 10-cent option there. So really makes a lot of sense when you sort of get that confidence around that to be able to do that.
There's a quick, there's yes, good questions to maybe insert here. So Guillermo asked on this slide, impact in sales equals impact on revenues, right, rather than volume. And keep me honest, Morgan, but I believe the answer is yes. So when you look at the larger price increase here, what they were seeing is that there, if I recall correctly, we don't have the numbers in front of us, but they did see an increase in volume, so like units sold, but the margin profile was such that like the sales didn't make up for it. So
sorry, yeah, sort of inverse, like they lost enough units that even the margin increase wasn't big enough to do that. Whereas like they kind of kept units flat in the 10-cent version, and so the margin went basically straight to the bottom line. So it's a really good call. And then there was another question from Alessandro in there too about B2B. Yes, all the time. And so there's a lot of different flavors of what this can look like. So, our client, we support like Keurig Dr. Pepper. So they make, Dr. Pepper, but they also make Snapple. They make a bunch of water products. And if you think about that, that's a B2B transaction that they're doing. It's B2B2C, and that they're trying to increase a category. But the difference between what Dr. Pepper cares about and what, say, Target cares about is real and different, right? Like Dr. Pepper cares about driving their brand sales, also the whole category. But that category manager, to Alex's point, like is pretty protective over that water category and really wants to drive that business in a margin forward way. On top of that, we've worked with auto parts retailers, not the same ones that Alex mentioned, actually, who have multiple channels. So they sell directly to consumers through online and retail, but they also have a big professional channel as well, where they sell to mechanics and professional upfitters for this particular brand. And managing that B2B relationship was very similar in that way, where you want to design an experiment to change price or to change the offering bundle that you're going to give to those consumers. And you have a control group of non-impacted businesses that you want to give that to, and you really just want to measure the difference. I mean, if you take this to its full extent, this is how medications get passed through, clinical trials and such. Like this same process should go for B2B transactions, retail transactions, and medications, all the same here. So yeah, great questions.
If I could, let me maybe also ask that question of Alex too, just to get his perspective. So Alessandro is asking of examples of testing in B2B. So any thoughts on that, testing or pricing in a B2B context?
Yeah, the Morgan was right, and you guys, the Alex, that's for us that what we see here, we faced honestly only maybe 2 times that the data is very important. And for me, the B2B missing very important piece of the information. This is actually where those transaction was happens. If you see in this test, we always saying about splitting the stores, right? We need to have the access to the POS data, and usually B2B receiving like actually missing this data. It's really hard. Like there's a huge lag between the information what we got from the point of sales, or even miss it or not exist at all. Like if you distribute your products through distributors, is why we honestly at Competera, we not work with B2B due to lack of data or noise of this data. Is like maybe better to work with Market Dial, who can do it maybe some manual human iterations around that. Yeah, this is my opinion.
Yeah, the data is a big issue in the B2B space. So there's ways to do it, but challenges for sure. So
yeah, that makes sense. Real quick, our part, and this actually ties really well into the next slide as well around pros and cons of this type of testing. One of the cons is that it's actually just really freaking hard, right, to do this. Like the statistics to be able to manage this, like imagine, you know, Competera's AI-driven pricing algorithms and efforts here, really, really complicated, lots of math. I'm so glad we don't have to do that. Likewise, we've spent the same amount of time sort of thinking about testing at scale and how to make this hit both B2B, B2C, B2B2C sort of businesses, and how to scale that out. So it's really complicated. And, you know, our part there, and I think when you have the right tooling, it really makes sense here. It helps reduce bias, first of all. So when you run an experiment, one dumb example would be is if you ran it in a store that's right next to your HQ, it's obviously not going to give you a read that matters, honestly. Like it's not going to be unbiased approach. It's going to have maybe that store will be impacted by a lot of HQ staff, and so it's just not a representative sample there. Second is one thing, retail is notorious for this, and Alex mentioned this on B2B. Retail has no you know, corner on the noisy data market here. Like it's noisy, it's ugly. It has big seasonal shifts. There can be weeks where certain stores are offline. And so just having so much noise, it's important to be able to reduce that noise. And when you design an experiment correctly, it reduces that noise dramatically. Significance and impactful results sort of goes side by side. A lot of times people say, well, this looks like I had a 3% you know, increase in margin from this pricing move. And that can be fair and fine to say, hey, there was a 3% difference between treatment and control group. That is a fair statement. When you understand the statistics behind it, what you would be nervous to say is, and when I roll this out again, I will see another 3% margin lift in that. So you have to understand how well a test was designed and statistical significance to be able to understand, is this sample representative? Meaning, is this generalizable? Is this generally interesting? And is there high confidence that that 3% wasn't just due to statistical sort of noise versus, hey, this pricing change actually drove that behavior? On the next one, next slide sort of highlights here, like the pros and cons of A/B testing, I think are pretty clear when it comes to this, or this type of testing are pretty clear. The negatives are, it takes a lot of work, right, to be able to do this, right? Like it requires a big data sort of lift and effort here. You have to make sure that the data is clean. You have to be super technical especially if you're going to do this by hand or manually. Like you have some analyst has to be you know, quite proficient, not only in sort of technical skills like sort of Python and other coding capacity, they would need deep statistical knowledge to do that as well. On the other hand, though, like this is the gold standard. We're going to talk about other things here which can be helpful and useful and maybe a little bit quicker and faster in some other ways. And if you can't overcome the cons, those are great options for you. But this is the absolute best possible thing, right? Like this is why we wait to take medications until it's gone through this process. This is the standard which most things should be judged by. It really helps you get a really strong read. It drives a ton of confidence in here. So when you're doing risky things like, hey, we're gonna, do a huge price take on this product or item set here, that can be nerve-wracking for retailers and brands alike. And so getting confidence that it worked, that you didn't alienate consumers, and that the ratio of elasticity that you nailed on there is really, really important. And it really is the best way to sort of showcase ROI of whatever initiative you're doing. I'll pass the mic back here to Alex, because I think he's got some really interesting examples of these other two types of testing and where those might come into play here as well.
Yeah, thank you, Morgan. Yeah, guys, as we mentioned, method one is most practical from the, I will say, the conversion perspective to how you go and sell to your board of directors and convince your board that this, guys, we tried and this is better way, but of course require a lot of preparation, and a lot of work behind. And then on these limitations, like we see if actually the example, what we're going to show you today, this is switchback testing. Switchback testing was not far away, was introduced first time, and I read that it probably was some of the Walmart publications of Walmart team in the online environment and Amazon. By the way, the switchback most often used by Amazon. Why? Because first of all, you don't have a stores to test to split, all right? And or you have a challenges. For example, you can't find, guys, also that happens, you just can't find very significant similarities in the stores, and you don't have a significant difference enough like in confidence to split it. And that's why you can use the switchback testing. And switchback testing means that technically this ability to set one prices and keep them certain time and then roll back to the previous prices and keep them again, right? And again, it's most used by online players. And this technically very often used by e-commerce players because they can't split this. And it can be run in the multiple categories at the same time. I will going to show you example where we did it simultaneously in the multiple different categories in the same approach. The overall idea, actually, this is keeping one price is why called switchback, because we put the new price and then next day or couple day switching to the old price. And usually it's like pairs, like 2 days or 2 weeks, then again 2 weeks, but usually like is it days. This is optimal. What we putting on the slide is most optimal setup as we see from our experiments. Next slide, please.
Yep.
Yeah, and this is one of the examples how the performance looks like, because then you can measure like 2 weeks with 2 weeks. You see, sorry, there's a lot of noise here, but test and control group in this matter is technically days, right? Days with the new prices versus days with old prices. And this is what same numbers of the metrics we usually monitor, like how the revenue develop, how the margin is developed, how sales item is developed, and also like how average shelf prices develop as well in test and control group. And of course, because we have a weekends, we have some seasonality inside the test. Usually it takes longer and we need to wait a bit longer. But it's honestly comparing, we did once the very cool stuff. We did A/B test and then switchback test for the same account, for the same revenue, etc. And the results in the difference was literally the same. It means that if you got the 6% uplift in the A/B test, switchback test also showing this more or less the same. It means that those methods is quite comparable and can be used just if you can't select properly test and control group. Yeah, let's move to the next slide. Yeah, and this also, like as I mentioned, the confidence interval. This example, you see the model was educated historically, and we start from the first week, it was already more than 5% impact. Then is how it goes over the weeks and drops till like 8%. But more or less, it was kind of sustainable effect over those weeks, and then we can roll out to the whole assortment, to the whole business, those new prices. In our reality, we're not technically testing the prices, we're testing like machine learning that can able to identify those contexts and can optimize prices better than we did without the price optimizer behind. Yeah, the next slide. Yeah, again, pros and cons. We'll also start backwards, Morgan. On the con side, it takes longer, guys, because we need to have this parse, and it's longer than A/B test in usual. yeah, this not 6 weeks, not 8 weeks, usually even longer. And honestly, still is like exists some this internal, when, for example, you testing this new pricing on pillows, you still has like cross category risks of cross category cannibalization, that you doing very cool here and you driving, or what we got, it was a beauty retailer, and we saw statistically, we see that our tests actually bring more traffic to the control group as well, because people seeing the cool prices, then you roll out back pricing where it was higher, the technically still some cannibalization happens. Yeah, but it's like only one, probably the best alternative to A/B test, and this is well suited for to situation where it's technically impossible to split, and
We see this, and maybe
yeah.
I can, yeah, we see this a lot, and it's not quite as back and forth as what you can do in e-com, but a lot of retailers will do this with LTO, limited time offers, in restaurants, so where they kind of put a menu item in and out and sort of track it that way. And the measurement is worse and not as accurate and all those kind of things. But to your point, like this could be the only practical sort of way to do that. Another way is, hey, we're going to, with marketing, for example, we have customers whose entire footprint is in sort of similar or the same marketing regions, right? Like it's not easy to say, hey, let's turn off the entire United States, but double down in Australia when all of your stores are in just Australia, for example. And so in those cases, it tends to be more of an on-off move, or let's go deeper or lighter in the marketing spend, and to be able to understand, hey, how effective was that there? So it's not the best case scenario, but it's a great sort of alternative if you can't do the normal A/B testing.
Yeah, this again, we're using this only in case where actually we can find those similarities, or it's hard to find, or it's technically impossible to keep different prices in different stores. Done. Let's use this only in this case. Okay, let's move forward.
Awesome. Great.
Yeah, and last but not least, this is backcasting. The small disclaimer that backcasting is something, honestly, I always say that we practice this only with the retailers who has significant maturity on their analytics and technical team, because technically it's the simulation in the past, something what happens, taking off the like actually from machine learning perspective, machine learning doesn't know that we optimizing past, right? This we create everything in the past, like looks like it's happening now, and then we compare to the results what real happens. And the next slide, this is backcasting opportunities. And the first part is actually testing of the prediction accuracy. Can neural network, for example, can we restore the same behavior as what happens in the past? And you can see here, like the orange line and the blue line, as a blue is a fact. It means that what is really happens. And by the way, you see this is a Christmas season here. And we see that orange line, that the predicted results should behave similarly, and it was quite and accuracy should be like higher than 90%. And in this case, the customer said our POC goals, A/B test goals, was to have the accuracy higher than 90%. As you see here, accuracy was even higher than that. Next slide. Yeah, and this is technically the same example as like A/B test, but it's not a control and test stores or categories, is actual and predicted results. You know, and also the good point here, then we can play with the past. For example, we can change the model and say, hey, let's optimize for sales items. Let's optimize for revenue. Let's have a limit for machine learning, like price index to competitors, or what will happen if we will not rely on competitors. And you can see how different it can be past with reality. But again, as any I said, it's still like a past, you know, like it's really hard to transit to the future, because past is not the, how to say, the metric to predict your future, but still, yeah. And let's move forward. This again,
Alex, there was a good question that came through. So I imagine part of the call it cons of this is that it can be hard to understand the methodology, but can you give us a bit of a sense? So the question was, what is some of the methodology used to do this backcasting and to create a prediction?
Yeah, the methodology technically the very simple. It's not a methodology. I can't call maybe this a methodology, but yeah, the algorithm the same. Technically, we give the model, we train the model of this historical data. Of course, the model always try to predict the future. Then, in the A/B test in method one, you go to the real world and saying, okay, now we're ready. Let's do and see this optimal price and see how the customer react in the reality, right? In backcasting, we technically do the same, trying to grab data of, for example, few weeks or few days, and see how model should recreate the sales gaps. And that should be the same as it was before backcasting. You can ask ChatGPT the basic backcasting principle. Yeah, this is the first part.
Right.
And then the second part, you see, we can affect the model, the different effects depends on different scenarios. And these scenarios, what I'm showing you, sorry, it's like very noisy, but this is like a blue line here. This is the real results, like real revenue results. And then we can create a different optimization scenario, say, let's optimize. And here we see the price index limitation. I mean, we optimized with the price limits was the competitor price index, not competitor minimal market price. It was a few lines and minimal, you see minimal margin limit, minimal competitive price limit. It means that we allow machine learning to do pricing with the specific limits and then see which results this is uplifts. And we see that, okay, if we in the past will optimize not for minimal market price, optimize for price index to competitors, we'll get better $600,000 in monthly revenue uplift, and this is respectively annually uplift. This is some, but still this is a lot of theory. Why I mentioned this disclaimer that this should be enough powerful retailer to be able to be convinced and especially bored. But we do have a very cool example, like is one of our customers who the founders at Stanford graduated, and they actually came with the idea, can we do just backcastings? If you can guys restore, we believe that algorithm, if they understand our business, let's go in production, because it's the fastest way. Of course, we don't need to wait all this, what we mentioned, method one and method two. We just see, okay, cool, we can restore. Technically, sorry for the long answer, but it's technically connecting the dots, grabbing off some data and see that model can restore it. If the restoration this with accuracy more than 90%, it means that we can then model.
That makes sense, and the long answer is helpful. So I can see why this would be a helpful method in getting to a quick answer that's really justifiable with good methodology. But to your point, you really need like a sophisticated group that kind of trusts it, you know, where A/B testing or split testing might just be easier to understand at, say, a board level, executive level. So very helpful.
Yeah, let's
awesome.
move.
Should we move forward?
Yep, this is probably last slide there. Yeah, same. This is the main challenge here is really hard to demonstrate the efficiency to not technical people. Let's say that way. Yeah. Still like sometimes what we happens when you even do backcasting, sometimes it's not avoiding to do A/B testing then to see that is in the real world is still working. We also had that case that in situation we got great results in backcasting, but then board came and say, you know, guys, all work, but let's go limited rollout in the real world. This is like not 100% eliminate limited rollout then. Yeah, the pluses, as you probably can read that very quickly. Yeah, this is quick. Actually, do not require, by the way, the integration, to complete the integration. There's only one methodology would don't require the full integration, and data should go back and forth because we just can do it with the historical data.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Alex. I think this backcasting to me is really cool. It's not something that Morgan and I do much on the market dial side, and just fascinating to see a different way to kind of approach it. With that in mind, we wanted to highlight super quick just this partnership between MarketDial and Competera. And you've seen some of this in the back and forth today, but I think one thing that makes this partnership work really well is that we're each experts in our own fields. The work that Alex and team do on optimized pricing, leveraging advanced analytics is amazing and second to none. And where MarketDial has its own competency is in that A/B testing, specifically the, what we call the split testing here is kind of what we've built our business on. And so what our partnership does, it brings kind of best of both worlds between the two, so that what you can do, very specifically in the retail space where we both play, is where we see this a lot, but also B2B, is Competera kind of provides that first part of the scientific method, which is the hypothesis of what it is that you should do. And in this case, what are kind of the strategic price moves that we should make? And those recommendations are based off of really good data and algorithms and methodology. And then where market dial comes in is that next step in the scientific method, which is testing it so that you can tweak it, get it right, have confidence before moving forward. So with that in mind, I thought it would be helpful just to kind of wrap up some of our discussion here with what we find as some of the kind of key risks and how to kind of mitigate those risks, if you will. And if you think about a strategic pricing project that's going to have testing in it, it involves a lot of players. And so the risks can kind of cut across a couple different areas. The first that comes to mind is with any project, there can be changes that happen. You know, businesses move really fast. They're responding to customers. They're responding to changing market dynamics. And some of those changes can take the flavor of, call it changes in goals, changes in scope of the project or pricing changes, and changes in stakeholders. And some of the impacts that those things can have is, broadly speaking, any change can just delay project delivery because you have to respond to those changes, scope the project differently, perhaps test for longer, and delay when it is that those pricing changes go out. Specifically, when you're talking about change in stakeholders, so those that are involved in the project, there can be confusion around who makes the decision at this point and what are the go, no go decisions there. So some of the things that we have found work really well in mitigating these things up front and responding in real time is, you heard this mentioned a lot, but we think a lot about the board and the C-level. So how do you include leadership up front? How do you kind of communicate potential changes in advance? And there's a lot of interesting things that you can do in terms of really setting yourself up for success up front. So one thing that the Competera team does really well is solution design documentation at the project outset. I'm curious, Alex, what have you found works really well in terms of having good solution design documentation up front? What do you think kind of is the recipe for that working well?
Keep it small. Yeah, that is the best way to do it, but it's important to have it. Like we tried without, and it really helps, and this can be resonated, like is this changing the goals? And yeah, this is something that should be small, understandable. It's really hard to make it really small, guys, to not try, but still like be like passionate. Like is why we're doing A/B testing, is to make it stuff faster, not longer. But having without this document is really hard to then convince each other, oh, why we set up this way, not the other way. And it should be just documented, like why those A/B tests set this way and why we come to this point, and just help just to get team brains back to the roots, saying, yeah, this is why we're here.
Perfect. Awesome. That's super helpful. Let me just hit a couple others because I don't want to run out of time. Oops, went forward too far. 1 sec. Okay. So just a couple other risks that we just want to make sure that you keep in mind. And, there's definitely a theme here where a lot of the issues that one can run into are kind of people related, but there's other things around data. Let me talk about the last kind of like people related, and it's lack of engagement. So anytime you're making a big change like strategic pricing, there can be issues with stakeholders not seeing the value of using a tool to do that. And that can have its own set of problems of it not getting sign off, having inefficient onboarding, et cetera. I thought I'd ask Morgan here, just given your experience in management consulting and also just as a CEO, you've done a lot in terms of change initiatives. What have you found leads to good engagement at a leadership or cross-functional level?
Oh, geez, Louise, I mean, this is people's whole lives. So the short answer here is completely probably not useful given how terse it will have to be. But I think the big buckets of things that we pitch when we're sort of implementing in this change process are a couple big things. First is we need executive sort of buy-in, first of all. So there's a whole task to get that and say, hey, this is what we're doing. This is how we're measuring it. Second is a common KPI sheet or a target goals sheet here. And to have the same language, to have the same goals is really, really key, so that when the executive buy-in does happen, everybody else knows their marching orders, so to speak, where to go, how to do it, what their target is. And then the third bucket here is room to fail. And this is connected to all of these and connected to all change management stuff. But particularly here is people need to be able to have the license to make mistakes and not fear for their job, for their credibility and all this kind of stuff. And when you have some combo of these things, it gives the organization capacity to change and to run in the right direction for it. So there's, whole people's careers that are over this stuff, but that's probably a high level for what we've seen in our time.
That's great. Thanks for that. Let me just hit on a few other key risks here. And I know we've got some questions we want to get to as well. So if I were to kind of like summarize these last two, it really comes down to issues with data, and they can kind of take on at least two flavors. So one is data logic issues, and then the other is just changes. So change requests or the need to kind of update things in real time. And so when you're talking about like logic, so the way that kind of data is understood, parsed, and modeled, it can, again, lead to project delivery delays because that needs to be comprehended by the model. And so what we found works really well is implementing data validation up front and checksums, where people are looking at and understanding that, are we using the data properly kind of up front. And then on the change request, so this is things like item costs or promotions during a project. Again, these things can limit accuracy, and they can, again, cause delays because you might need to run a test for longer. And so, again, this can be solved really well by upfront doing things like data and pricing workshops. Alex, I thought you highlighted an interesting example earlier that maybe kind of fits in this data change request of there being some promotional activity that was happening that wasn't accounted for in the model. What are some common issues that you've seen in kind of this area of data changes or logic issues?
Yeah, this is actually, these rules in this table created only from practical example, guys. We not made up any line here. It's like, if it happens, we're adding here. Yeah, and this is usually, honestly, this is mostly technical, not business-wise, and the data just dropped, or some of the source of the data changed, and we don't know, like they're replacing CRM, or yeah, and this is very often. Honestly, this is happens really often, and this is why the mitigation is here still like to we or restarting the project or just adding extra weeks to the pilot. They're
Yep.
saying, okay, on these 2 weeks, you saw it actually in that slide, you will have this that it was 1 week 0, right? Because we're not counting this week because it was some mess in the data disappeared and we can't measure. Or when there's a promotion happens, we never like just customer said in this test group, all fine, is no promo. Then the marketing team was not aware as something is going on and just put something huge banner on front of the store. Come here. This is like, something like snurfing show happening here. Yeah, that is.
Yep. Awesome. Let me pepper in a question real quick just before we end. I know we've got like 3 minutes left, but Bob Lavania asked a great question. Does your solution also allow for integration of custom data pipelines to send process streams? Do you also have a metadata source somewhere? I'll just answer super quickly from the market dial side if it's helpful. We're very customized. So yes, very customized in our data pipeline approach. Basically, any data that you want to do testing, we process it. So anything that you would add on that, Alex, on the
same here, guys, is always some custom, is exactly because it's not even if you have a really cool latest ERP system or warehouses, still something is always missed. Is why no way you can iterate with the custom fields. And the second question, Also, yes, for example, on our side, we collect a lot of data regarding like weather, local events, etc. Was like call it data lake, and this data lake is ours. We try to, for example, your store, we need like your store location, but we know all the competitor store locations. We know the traffic information, like from Google Maps API, like what is the traffic looks like. Of course, it's always interconnected with some metadata, what's surrounding this stuff. We try to, yeah, increase the data set as much as we can.
That's
I
awesome.
don't mention this,
Great.
but very cool trick, guys. We also do have ability. We create sometimes the synthetic data. Like we have a mask, for example, with a promotional data, but we know we have it, and we can model for pilot. It can be run like it's mean that we just actually have algorithm for synthesized data, some specific source what we need to have, and we just have another algorithm for actually faking your promo expenses, for example.
That's great. Awesome. Well, listen, I know we're coming up on time, so why don't we just leave a couple last thoughts for you here. So there's a lot of things that we want to talk to you about. I think Alex has a couple just interesting resources here that you can consider to learn more about pricing. Do you want to cover this real quick, Alex?
Yeah, just please, guys, you see we publishing a lot of pricing related materials and probably having like a biggest pricing community right now in LinkedIn for retailers. Yeah, and please join, please grab the materials, ask questions, and it's a very great pricing academy. We spend like weeks to create all this cool stuff there that you can train. Yeah, just scan it or just come to our LinkedIn. You will find all these links. Yeah, but there's a lot of
Yeah.
useful content there.
Yeah, these guys host a really great community, so please do consider that. Also, if you want to just explore partnership or just ask us questions, please reach out to us. You know, we'll send this recording. You have our emails here. There's nothing that we love more than a nerd out on data, pricing, testing, so please reach out to us. So with that, I want to thank our two main event speakers here, Morgan and Alex. Thanks for your time, sharing just your years of insight and experience here. I think this was a really rich and interesting discussion. So
Thank you, Josh, for moderating and organizing all of us. It's really a great job. Thank you.
all right.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.